Good afternoon, NABJ family, and welcome to our Mergers and Acquisitions webinar, How to Survive and Thrive. I will be your moderator today. I'm Walter Smith Randolph. I'm your Vice President of Broadcast. I'm also the Executive Producer of Investigations at CBS News New York, which is owned by Paramount, which was just bought by Skydance, which just bought the Free Press. And that is kind of why we're here today, because there have been so many changes, so many mergers, so many acquisitions, name changes, and splits. And so we're here to help you navigate all of that and to tell you the tools and what you need to know as this continues to happen. Again, so many different changes with CBS, with MSNBC, which is now MS Now, which is owned by Versant, which is maybe owned by Comcast NBC, right? So we're here to navigate through all that. We're also going to talk about the FCC cap lift. We know that Nexstar and Sinclair and some other companies are looking to buy more stations. So we have a great panel of experts who are going to help us navigate through that. They're going to introduce themselves, and we're going to start up with Renee Washington with Resilience Wins Coaching. Renee?
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. I spent more than 25 years working in the local news industry, and my most recent position was Vice President of News, aka News Director of NBC4 in Los Angeles. Today, I am an executive coach and the proud owner of Resilience Wins Executive Coaching and Consulting LLC. And I help journalists, leaders, anyone who identifies as an overachiever navigate change, build their self-esteem and self-confidence, overcome imposter syndrome, and lead their teams and themselves with impact and clarity. I am joining this conversation today because the business is evolving faster than ever. And I want to share with you the insights and the lessons that I learned during my journalism career and what I have learned since my pivot about adapting to change and staying open and positioning yourself for what's next.
Thank you, Renee. And next up to introduce herself, you may have seen her before, works with NABJ a lot, Mary Cavallaro with SAG-AFTRA. Mary?
Thank you, Walter, and I am thrilled to be here with you all. Thank you for having me, and I love participating in all of NABJ's programming. My name is Mary Cavallaro. I am the Chief Broadcast Officer for SAG-AFTRA. I've been with the union in total almost 27 years now, having started in the Philadelphia office. Now I oversee the entire country with respect to SAG-AFTRA's work in news and broadcast. So we have a number of collective bargaining agreements, both nationally and locally. I negotiate many of them. We have teams around the country that negotiate those contracts. And one of the things that we deal with on a regular basis is mergers and acquisitions, sales, and the impact on employees. Our job is to represent the workers in our industry when it comes to everything that you do at work, everything that impacts you. And one of the most significant developments in our industry that could have an impact on employees is the sale of a television station or a network or a merger. And we advocate for our working members around the country when those transactions happen. So I'm happy to talk to you about that and answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
And next up, we have David Goodfriend with I Street Advocates. David?
Thanks, Walter, and it's really an honor to be here with all of you. My name is David Goodfriend. I'm president of I Street Advocates. I started my government career working in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. I ended up working for President Clinton in the West Wing and ended my government career as a media legal advisor to a commissioner of the FCC. And in my private practice, I've spent a lot of time fighting mergers. When I was vice president of law and public policy at Dish Network, we fought a lot of mergers, some successfully, some unsuccessfully. And now as president of I Street Advocates, I've represented the News Guild, CWA, one of the labor unions that represents journalists. I represent Byron Allen and his company. He's probably one of the most preeminent Black-owned media companies in the country. And I am proud to say that on behalf of the News Guild and other unions, we successfully blocked Standard General and Apollo Private Equity's attempt to take over Tegna, the second largest broadcast station group. As has been mentioned earlier, Tegna is again in the crosshairs. There may be another transaction coming up that would attempt to acquire Tegna. Believe me, I intend to fight that one too. And as also has been mentioned, the FCC is considering lifting the national cap on broadcast ownership along with other ownership rules. So all of this is very timely and very relevant. And I look forward to our conversation.
All right. Thank you, David. And we're going to start there, kind of what you mentioned, because, we've been here before. We've seen this before. Years ago, Tegna, when I first started in the business, Tegna didn't even exist. It was still part of Gannett. But it's a little bit different now with who controls the White House and the FCC and all of that. So my question to you is, we're hearing of several potential mergers and acquisitions, including the review of the TV ownership cap by the FCC, as you mentioned. From your perspective, what is on the horizon, and do you think we will actually see that cap lifted?
Well, what's on the horizon is a concerted effort to blow past or even eliminate the cap. That's for sure. But I want to point out that there's a fascinating dynamic going on right now on the political right among conservatives and Trump supporters. If you want evidence of that, just look at the FCC proceeding that asks whether or not we should eliminate the national cap, and you'll see that three significant conservative stakeholders showed up to say no, we should not lift that cap, that it would be bad for conservatives too. Those three conservative stakeholders are Newsmax, whose CEO and founder is very close to President Trump, CPAC, which is a conservative organization. And by the way, all of them argued that diversity of viewpoint is important to conservatives. They essentially are saying, why should our programming and news be decided in big coastal cities? Shouldn't local newsrooms have more of a say? And I identify myself as a progressive and a lifelong Democrat, and I say amen. I agree with that. So before they start popping the champagne corks at Nexstar headquarters, they should take a good hard look at this dynamic. It's not going to be a slam dunk, and there may actually be some significant pushback on lifting that cap. Now, I will also add, Perry Sook, the head of Nexstar, is making a play to acquire Tegna. I mentioned that I helped block a transaction to acquire Tegna in the past. That deal, by its very definition, would violate today's national cap on broadcast ownership. So clearly, they're trying two different moves. One is to eliminate the rule. The other is to do a transaction or get a waiver from that rule that basically would render the rule meaningless anyway. Either way, this is coming fast and furious at the FCC, and it's going to be decided one way or the other soon.
Okay, thank you for that. And if our folks who are viewing this, if you do have questions, we ask that you please use the Q&A box. We will get to your questions towards the end of this panel. Please do not use the chat box. Please use the Q&A box and put your questions in there as they come up, and we'll get to them towards the end of our questions. So we're going to switch over to Mary. So Mary, if this cap is lifted, what does that mean for station employees? What happens to my contract? Are there any union protections?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned earlier, it can be one of the most impactful events for all employees of any company that's sold or merged, or even the company making the purchase. You see you see a bigger company making a purchase of a smaller company, and even those employees see an impact. And what I would say is, just in my experience, and I started with the union in 1995 before the major move in the ownership cap changes in 1996, post 96, jobs. We do see jobs go away. We do see consolidation of operations in a way where you do see a reduction in employment. And that's one of the reasons, David, and many of us who are probably on the in the same way of thinking in terms of reducing those limits, that it has not been good for diversity of viewpoint since really the major changes that have gone on since the 90s. And in terms of union versus non-union, so in a union situation, which I can speak to, one of the first things we do on behalf of our members are information requests to all of the parties involved. So we know how the union contracts going to be impacted, how your health benefits, your retirement benefits, just location of employees, consolidation of operations, So we get that information, then we advocate for our employee or the members that we represent that are impacted to make sure that we do our best to preserve jobs, we do our best to limit the impact on employees. And so, with respect to your personal contract, employers are very smart. They put language in those contracts that allow them to be assigned to whoever might purchase that station. So your contract will follow station to station. One of the things that we as a union have done in since 96 and actually before then, actually, I'm remembering when CBS and Westinghouse got together long time ago, but that's how long I've been doing this. One of the first things we really started doing in our labor agreements was we started talking about how your material, your content that you create can be used or not used on all the other stations or properties or platforms that employer might own, and how you could be assigned to work on those platforms. We're having those conversations today when it comes to new platforms that companies are developing. One example is Fast Channel. As these streaming platforms evolve, and that's a function of these companies getting bigger, your workday changes dramatically. Gone are the days of you're doing something for the 5 and 6. Now you're on all the time. And so I would say workload is another area where we focus our efforts.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so for Renee, you've been a news director, you've been an executive producer. We've seen station consolidation before. From your perspective, which positions get cut first, and what can I do to protect myself or to prepare myself?
Okay, and before I respond to that, I do want to share a quick disclaimer that what I'm about to say about budget cuts and layoffs is based on my own experience, and that while most companies go about executing in a similar way, there could be some differences that you'll notice. So, with that said, I do want to share a sobering fact with you all. And I have been following the Press Gazette, which is based in London, and they've been tracking media job losses in the US and the UK. Since 2023, more than 12,000 journalism, news, media type positions have been eliminated. And unfortunately, we know that this is something that we are going to continue to see. Usually, cuts start where there is redundancy, vacant roles, and a low risk of litigation. So you may see cuts in management, as well as producer ranks, writers, reporters, photographers, because that's where we tend to have a lot of redundancy. You may see positions that have been recently vacated not get filled along with current openings. Those roles may go away as well. And usually, the first people that leadership tends to look at when it comes to cuts are those who are not meeting expectations and who have a documented history of performance and HR issues. So, that is an example of your performance is a major factor that goes into this decision making. So, when leaders are looking at their org charts, and they're trying to identify roles and positions to eliminate, the first thing they're asking themselves is what and who brings value. So, to protect yourself, you want to make sure that your value is visible. And what I mean by that is, first and foremost, just meeting the basic expectations of getting to work on time, turning in high quality work consistently, meeting your deadlines, and being a good newsroom citizen. Also, be someone who comes up with solutions, who thinks outside of the box and is willing to take chances on trying new things. And you want to build relationships with people in other departments. You want people from different rooms to be able to vouch for your value and your work and what you bring to the table. Also, don't think that your work speaks for itself. In times of change and moments like these, you need to speak for your work. And I know that this can be challenging for some Black folks because we're raised to be humble and to be modest. And I just want to let you know that there's no arrogance in acknowledging and recognizing the good work that you are producing and that you are creating and how you're contributing. The problem that you run into is if it begins to go to your head and you begin to think that you're better than other people and looking down on other people. But when it comes to saving your job and positioning yourself for new opportunities, stay grounded, stay kind, but you got to toot your own horn and make sure that your hiring managers and again, people from other departments know what you are contributing and bringing to the table and how it's benefiting the organization. I also want to go back real quick to some other areas that may be at risk when it comes to job cuts and layoffs. So freelancers, typically, the companies do not have the same legal obligations to freelancers as they do to full-time staff employees, and especially those who are protected by a union. Believe it or not, even top performers who are high earners, because remember, budget cuts are all about saving money. So if you have a salary that is significantly higher than average, there's a possibility that you could find yourself on the list for layoffs. Also, if your contract is coming up during a time of cuts, that's sometimes considered a clean break and therefore lowers that risk of litigation that I talked about. And I also want to make sure that I point out that people who are in protected categories, this doesn't necessarily mean for you that you have job security, especially if a whole department or if an entire team is eliminated, because it's going to be really difficult for you to prove that you've been singled out. So I just wanted to make sure that I went back and made those few points when we're talking about the types of jobs and positions that could be at risk.
Renee, thank you for that. And now that we have mentioned the doom and gloom and the sobering facts, I'm going to do a round robin. Do you see any potential positives coming out of potential mergers and acquisitions? And we'll start with David Goodfriend.
Well, the argument that management makes over and over again sometimes is true. That is, in order to save this operation, we have to make some cuts. And in order to save this operation, we have to merge with somebody else and find synergies. But in my experience, that's often not the case. And I'll just tell this one story. I'll keep it short, I promise. But when we were opposing the private equity and hedge fund acquisitions of Tegna, we demanded to see internal documents. And fortunately, the FCC worked with us and we got those internal documents. At the same time that the head of Standard General was saying publicly, we have no intent to cut jobs, he was telling his bankers in great detail exactly which jobs he intended to cut. So don't believe the hype. If somebody's telling you a merger is not going to threaten jobs, I'm sorry, I would like to see proof of that because usually the proof shows otherwise. However, if you're working at a company that really is not doing well and is suffering, it may very well turn out that the infusion of capital and the streamlining of operations could mean survival of the company. And if you're lucky enough to be one of the people who keeps their jobs, that's good for you. So I don't want to say I'm inherently always against the theory behind a merger. I just think all of us need to demand proof that what's being said publicly is actually what's being said to the banks, to the lenders, to the investors, and make sure you're getting told the straight story.
Okay. Thank you, David. Mary, any positives that you see that might come out of this or that have in the past?
I struggle with the positives in terms of the ultimate impact on employees. I guess that in some cases, but I think this is more connected to the expansion of media platforms, there might be more places to put people in terms of the work to be done. Unfortunately, more and more we see they're just taking, for instance, the TV reporter that was on the TV station, just having them do more work. But it is expanding in terms of the number of platforms that are out there for jobs. I do think from a union perspective and employee representative perspective, it allows us as bargaining representatives and our members as organized employees to get together in a way and coordinate on a national basis. So what do I mean by that? So we now, SAG-AFTRA, instead of just negotiating the NBC contract in New York or in Philly or in Chicago, we try to get all of those people talking together and coordinating and approaching the employer as one instead of as individual shops. And they learn from each other. And if something is happening in St. Louis, we tell everybody around the country at a station who's owned by the same owner, hey, this is coming. Let's talk about how we're going to deal with it. Instead of what we used to do years ago, which I think a lot of unions did, was really just approach it station by station, operation by operation. As the ownership group gets smaller, it allows us as a union to really strategize in terms of how we're going to respond to different things in a more coordinated way. So there's no kind of like picking one group off before the other group has a chance to discuss the issue.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. And Renee?
I agree with everything that David and Mary just shared. I'll also add that, piggybacking off of what Mary said, that this could create an opportunity for you to learn some new skills and be able to upskill. And that's going to be something that you can add to your resume that will potentially help you for advancement in your career.
Okay. And we're going to stick with you, Renee. We're going to talk a little bit about pivoting, right? So if you're looking to pivot maybe to something that's news adjacent, maybe that's something that's different. Maybe you're a broadcaster who's always done television, who now wants to do podcasting or audio. Where should you be looking and what should you be doing to prepare yourself?
Okay. Honestly, everywhere. Companies and organizations in every industry are realizing the power of storytelling and using that to connect with their audiences and consumers. I found this fact as I was preparing for today from Content Marketing Institute, and it says that 70% of brands now prioritize content marketing, which is making an ad look like it's a story. So for journalists, you know how to do that. You know how to tell a story. You know how to communicate clearly. You know how to meet deadlines. You know how to lead under pressure and work under pressure. And you know how to connect with audiences. Those are incredibly marketable and transferable skills that can be used in corporate communications, PR, nonprofits, universities, healthcare, sports teams, and even entrepreneurship if you choose to go that route. The key, and this is something that I had to learn very early on when I made my pivot, is to stop telling yourself the story that you only know how to do TV. You actually know how to influence, engage, and inform people. And the thing is, you've just done it in one arena, right? So you actually have a lot of transferable skills that sometimes you overlook. And I'm just going to give you a few examples here. So, for instance, journalists, we're crisis managers. We know how to lead under pressure. We're communicators. We make the complicated simple. We're relationship builders. We know how to earn trust quickly. That's how you get those exclusive interviews and break some of the stories that you do. We're adaptable. We've already evolved through cable, digital, social, now streaming, and AI. The untapped part of all of this for us is talking about our skills and how we have those conversations. So, for example, producing a newscast isn't just doing news, it's project management, it's leadership, and cross functional collaboration. If you're covering a breaking news story, that translates to strategic thinking, decision making, and working under pressure, meeting tight deadlines along with agility. So you've already got what you need to make a possible pivot. It's just about reframing the language so it is applicable to other industries, and those hiring managers can understand how the skills that you have can contribute and benefit their organization. So I strongly encourage you to really go through and assess your skills and assess your strengths, and then look at how it intersects with some of the positions and the roles in other industries that you may want to look into. And you can use AI to help you with this. Put your resume into AI and ask it to tell you what other types of jobs would I be qualified for. And if I find myself in front of a hiring manager during an interview, how do I communicate my strengths and my skills and my talents to them and how it would be a benefit to their company?
Okay. Thank you, Renee. And Mary, you've been with the union for a long time. You've seen a lot of people come and go. Any success stories from your time from union members who have pivoted or even reframed?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to echo some of the things that Renee said, because the people that work in this industry are some of the most adaptive people I've ever met. And you all know you're multitasking right now. That's just been growing over the past 15 years, especially. You do more in your workday than I think a lot of people do in other industries. I know that for a fact. And that's a saleable thing for you. What I have seen is, if you're talking about people leaving, television and radio, is that there are so many other platforms where they're going and taking their talents. I just spoke to somebody this morning who left broadcast news and is now has a platform on like a podcast and also an X. Very successful. They're able to monetize their work, independent journalism. We're seeing quite a bit of that. People are making it work. It's finding the way to make it work. I do hope, and I know NABJ is a leader in this area and helping each other network and get the information you need. Is how do I monetize that? We all need to be working together to share that information. And what I'll say is, one of the things that SAG-AFTRA has done to kind of help as this has been happening with our industry is we now have a standalone agreement, if you're a podcaster, that you can sign with the union. And basically, if you monetize your content, you can earn money towards healthcare and cover yourself via healthcare and a pension benefit. So that's happening on the podcasting front, but we also have a separate agreement that we've created for influencers. So if you are an influencer out there, you can if you're monetizing and you're earning money, you can get healthcare. So and a retirement benefit. So as you're kind of thinking, oh gosh, I don't want to leave this corporate world because how am I going to pay for my benefits? What am I going to do for retirement? SAG-AFTRA and other unions are doing their best to kind of prepare for those changes for you. So I would encourage you, if whether you're in a news guild or SAG-AFTRA, to really use your union. Even if you're not, SAG-AFTRA does talk to anybody who has these questions, union or non. We welcome you coming to us to help.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. And so we're going to shift back to David. So during the Biden administration, there was a lot of talk about outlawing non-competes. What is the current status of that? What does that look like to you?
Well, that was all based on an antitrust enforcement theory. In other words, when we think about competition between companies, it's more than just what price they charge consumers or what they offer consumers. It's also about the labor market, who they hire, what they pay. And if you allow employers to effectively trap workers, you're thwarting competition for labor, and that's bad for workers. The Federal Trade Commission did promulgate an order prohibiting these non-competes. And believe me, we're not talking about science positions at a high-tech company. These non-competes appeared in fast food restaurants and other places where workers ought to be able to move freely from place to place, and they were being restricted. What's the status of it now? It doesn't look good. I'm not going to mince words. This administration that's in power today is not very favorable to that. And I think we have to look to the states, some of the bigger states, California, New York, Illinois, where antitrust enforcement in labor markets is still very robust. But I think it's worthwhile, and Mary's point is so worth repeating and emphasizing. Unions are your friend. Like, I can't overemphasize that. I represent the News Guild. I represent CWA, and NABET obviously is a chapter of CWA. Mary is doing incredible work for SAG-AFTRA. In the 5 or so years that I've been working with the new president of the News Guild, John Schlois, we've watched record-setting numbers of journalists sign up to join the union, record numbers of strikes that successfully result in good contracts. I mean, if ever there was a time when workers need to stick together, this is it. So listen to Mary when she says, we welcome you, we want to bring you into the union, we've got something to offer you. If there's an effort underway to organize your workplace, please don't be afraid. I think it's time that you join together and make sure that if somebody tries to jam a non-compete down your throat, you have a union standing behind you to say no. So I think that may be the most important takeaway from this conversation is collectively journalists still have a lot of power. I will just add this as kind of a love note to you all. I was an English composition major who volunteered at the local TV station where I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, to do stories as kind of a runner. And I got to tell you, I thought about becoming a journalist. Don't hold it against me that I became a lawyer, but knowing that in my heart, the journalists of this country are still the heroes, and you owe it to yourselves to have that kind of feeling of power, and especially collective power.
And Mary, I think you can weigh in on here as well, because I know that there was some work that SAG-AFTRA was doing to successfully get non-competes overturned in various states. How is that effort going right now?
Right. So non-competes are generally unlawful in California. We, back in the day, I mean, SAG-AFTRA has been working state by state to outlaw non-competes, specifically in our industry. So they might be lawful generally in New York, for instance, but for broadcasters, as of 2008, you cannot enforce a non-compete for broadcast television and radio in New York. That's also true in Massachusetts, Maine, Connecticut, Washington, D.C., Illinois, I'm missing some, Arizona, Washington State. There are other states where there's some kind of tweaks to it. There's some salary thresholds, which we don't really like, but we work state by state to kind of pass that legislation. It's been tough lately. The broadcast lobby does not like us to come try to prohibit non-competes because, as David said, essentially what those agreements do is keep salaries low. I will just add to that point, it's not just about non-competes. I know some of you out there have contracts with liquidated damages clauses in them. There's a company right now that's signing people to contracts where they're not putting raises built in. You're signing a 3-year contract and you're not getting a raise each year. There's all kinds of different things that I think are just as onerous as non-competes, and we're looking to target those as well. We recently did a national survey of our membership who are signed to personal service contracts to kind of get from them what's really important, because one of the things I find ironic is as these companies are going to limit or reduce the ownership regulations, one of the arguments they're making is we can't be competitive because of these FCC regulations. So, that's our argument. Like we need a free market to determine what salaries are, and to get a free market, you need to get rid of non-competes and some of these other provisions.
Thank you for that, Mary. And we'll go to Renee next. What are some of the untapped skills that broadcasters and digital journalists have that can help them kind of navigate through some of this instability?
One of the things that I always remind the journalists that I work with is that you already have the skills to navigate this industry. It's just about tapping into them on a deeper level. I consider myself a forever journalist and will always advocate for the power of journalism. I chose to get out of the business because my values changed and what was important to me also changed after doing it for 25 years. I just wanted a slower, more peaceful lifestyle. And what I tell journalists to lean into is first their emotional intelligence and your relationship building skills. You've spent your career reading people, building trust, and staying calm under pressure. And those skills will serve you if you decide to stay in the business when it comes to adapting to new leaders, new colleagues, and possibly a new culture as well. Also, you're curious, you're quick learners, you're critical thinkers. Those skills can help you see the bigger picture and stay open to new ideas instead of clinging on to the old way of doing things. And that will also help you stand out when you're open to and willing to embrace change and trying something new. So when people worry about the instability, I tell them lean into those skills. That is your emotional intelligence, your resilience, your adaptability, that curiosity that you have. And those are going to be your anchors as you're navigating this time of change, whether you stay in the business or you decide to leave and do something different.
Okay. Mary, do you want to weigh in on that one as well?
Yeah, I love everything that Renee said. I also always tell people, and I have kids, one's 21, one's 23, and I tell them this too. Always remember your value. You have all those amazing skills, and I just cannot tell you, the communication piece is being able to talk to people, to listen to people. You have those skills totally, probably above most professions. I always tell people listen first, but that's what you do, right? You're telling stories only because you're listening to people. So incredible skills. But I find that this industry, while you have all those skills, it does its best sometimes to make you feel small, and to make it kind of limit your value. Oh, there's somebody coming up behind you who wants your job, and they'll work for $10,000 less. I do think that does a number on us, right? And I think if you're ever doubting your value, you need to find that mentor, and that's why I love speaking to NABJ. Find that mentor that's going to be that sounding board for you to kind of help you gain your confidence. And if you have questions, the other thing I'll just emphasize, I think you need to find people to ask them of. This is like a business, like to be successful, where networking super important. Never be afraid to ask a question. I love this part of my job because I get to be that person. I have relationships that I've built with NABJ, with people who have never been in a union station, but who still call me today and I talk to. And I do think you got to find those people in your life, in your career, that even when you leave television or radio or whatever you're doing, are that kind of pillar of strength for you.
Hey, Walter.
Yes, Dave.
I just want to jump in with an example that backs up what Mary and Renee have been saying here. So I work in government relations in Washington, D.C., and information is the coin of the realm. What's going on? What's the latest? What's going to happen? Nobody's better at that than a journalist. And I've seen numerous journalists who worked in a particular field, that for a trade publication, let's say in healthcare or telecommunications, they will do work for a subscription newsletter that's focused solely on that vertical and get paid handsomely for it. And then they might write op-eds or write feature pieces elsewhere, but they're paying the rent through that high subscription rate publication. Or in the alternative, they'll work for somebody who's in the business of collecting intel, and they'll use all their journalistic skills to help the investment fund or the lobbying firm or whatever gather information. And then the same individual journalist will freelance to do some of their passion projects. And everything Mary and Renee have said about the skill set of journalists is validated by these individuals I've known for years in Washington, D.C., who've been able to translate their journalistic skills into any number of places and still keep their passion for writing, for journalism, for whatever it is, alive at the same time.
And that's good to know because I think a lot of us want to remain journalists. We just want to figure out where the lane is. And so you mentioned that there might be some trade organizations that, you write for them and they pay handsomely. Could you give us an example? Asking for a friend.
Um, without knowing whether or not any of these folks are hiring, there's Capital Council, there's Politico Pro, there's Bloomberg, there are associations of financial firms. I do some work for PayPal. They use newsletters, subscription services, and in every vertical they exist. So I've mentioned financial services and telecommunications and healthcare, but they're everywhere. And it may be that you have to develop the beat a little bit more in order to really work on staff for those folks. But I'm thinking of a journalist who used to work at Bloomberg, who then moved over to Capital and is doing exactly the same thing, getting paid well. The only difference is that his writing is not read by millions of people around the world. It's read by this smaller cadre of subscribers, but it doesn't stop him from writing the feature or writing an op-ed piece, as I said before, and publishing it anywhere.
Right.
And
we're
I'd
gonna-
like to jump in real quick too, because we're also seeing this emergence of nonprofit news initiatives in some major cities. And maybe, Mary, that's something you can speak to as well about what opportunities might look like there for people who are in SAG-AFTRA.
You're on mute, Mary.
Apologies. So thank you for that. Public media is an area that has been growing significantly. Unfortunately, the cuts recently have, created a strain, but huge opportunities there. And attached to that, I guess we're talking nonprofit, but it seems like they seem to be more independent instead of corporate in the way they structure their newsrooms. So they're large newsrooms compared to what you see in the commercial space, which is why the reductions in public media funding was such a shame, because we were seeing it work in terms of devoting time and resources to covering the news. What we are looking at and seeing now is efforts state by state to find state funding for those newsrooms. And we've been talking to David's client, the News Guild, and working together to support this legislation to be able to, keep those newsrooms strong. I will say one of the things, I'm negotiating a couple of contracts in public media right now, one in Texas. We just organized a new station in Texas and one in Florida. And one of the things is we're seeing the audience respond in looking to help with the funding. It's inspirational, but what I find inspirational about it is not just the support for public media, but the support for journalism. So I think, to Renee's point, there are so many different opportunities in nonprofit media as well that I think people really need to look, and they're looking to hire in a lot of those places. Let's just cross our fingers that they could keep the funding to keep these organizations strong.
And I have to echo that your skills, when you do go to those nonprofits, they're very valuable. I did the market race going from market to market for about 12 years before I was recruited to Connecticut Public Broadcasting, where I launched an investigative unit. And we did a lot of those fund drives. We met with our funders, we met with our audience, we had, community events where people wanted to really support our efforts. And so, and even then I was able to grow our investigative team from 3 people to 5 people. And so there are other nonprofits besides public media, like the 19th, the Marshall Project, Capital B. So they are out there. It's about finding them and kind of and knowing them. Before we get to our questions, I do want to circle back to you, David, because I think that folks might see the White House, the Senate, they may look at the FCC and say, okay, these mergers acquisitions, we already know what's going to happen. But you said that it was able to be prevented with Standard General, and I do remember hearing that company name a lot, like they wanted to buy a lot. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and a little bit more about the opposition from like Newsmax and how close they are to the president?
Yeah. By the way, I misspoke earlier. It's Capital Forum is the publication I was trying to spit out. I said Capital Council, and it's one of many. Yeah. So I think when we succeeded in blocking the acquisition of Tegna by Standard General, it was a surprise to everyone. And that was during the Biden administration when President Biden said, we care about labor unions, we care about jobs, we care about competition. And even then, it was an uphill climb to have the FCC send the transaction to a hearing, which effectively killed the deal. It's always an uphill battle to stop a merger in our country, in our culture, and under our law. That having been said, the winning combination invariably is assembling a coalition of really meaningful stakeholders and meaningful stakeholders to the people in power. So I learned, Walter, I don't mind emphasizing this. I opposed the acquisition of your company by Skydance on behalf of the Teamsters Union local in Hollywood and SAG-AFTRA and a bunch of other unions that signed on. We made many of the same arguments that we made in the Tegna proceeding, and we lost. We didn't get anything out of this administration. No job protections. Don't worry, Walter, though. I think you're safe. So how do you stop this particular administration from allowing a merger? I would argue it's through the very people this administration cares about the most. And they care about Newsmax, and they care about CPAC, and they care about One America News. Those companies came forward on the record at the FCC to oppose lifting the national cap. There's your opening. There's your opening. I don't have to agree with them on everything. I don't, but I agree with them on this one. So how do we help them? Let them be the tip of the spear. Let them be the face of the opposition. Make the people in power think twice. Like, actually, there's somebody on your team who's not for this, and in fact is very much against it. That will throw sand in the gears, and that's how we start to slow down the merger and acquisition process, if that's the goal. I'm not saying anything new or revelatory here. This is advocacy 101. But the hard part is, especially in this day and age, and I will tell you, I feel this profoundly all the time. There's an ambivalence, if you have the political beliefs that I do, about working with somebody who's espousing political beliefs that are very different. It's not easy to hold your nose and say, all right, I think I got to work with you on this. But do you want to win or not? You want to stop the deal or not? If you want to stop the deal, you got to work with people that the decision maker cares about. And I'll mention it again. Newsmax, CPAC, One America News, highly conservative, pro-President Trump, pro-MAGA organizations that came to the FCC and said, don't do it. Don't lift the cap. Well, politics makes for strange bedfellows, and there you have it. I'm a guy who represents unions and is a progressive Democrat, and I'm going to agree with those three stakeholders every time on that particular issue. I think that's how you get the job done. And the end of the story is not written here. Somebody's going to write the story that will go into the history books about what happened with this attempt to further consolidate broadcast media. It's not a given. It's not written in stone that these guys are going to win. It's hard to beat them, but when you see voices within the circle of friends of the administration opposing it, that's a good sign.
Okay. Thank you for that, David. So we're going to switch to some questions while we have a few minutes left. This is from one of our earlier questions. The person said, thank you, Mary, for breaking it down in relatable terms. What is SAG-AFTRA doing to reach journalists where they are with this useful information before they freak out and quit or get downsized?
So that depends if you're at a union station or a non-union station. So if you're a union station, we have staff around the country. You basically have a staff rep that you should know about, plus your shop steward, we call them. There are member reps in the station. And if you believe that the shop needs information about a certain potential transaction, make sure you're talking to that person, and because you're the bosses, that's how a union works. The members are the bosses. We work for you. So we want to lead that effort. If you're not at a union station, um, I think you can get my information online. Happy to talk to anybody to kind of maybe let you know. Let's say, for instance, you're at a Nexstar station or a Tegna station that's not union. Talk to us, talk to me. Happy to kind of share information as to what we're doing and what we're learning.
And this is not a Q&A, but I did want to ask you this, Mayor. Are you seeing more organizations unionize? I was thinking, I went to the IRE Gala in New York City, and I saw, as I was going in, I saw some friends outside who were, I can't remember what organization what they were with, but they were handing out stickers saying we're trying to unionize. Are we seeing that?
Yeah, when I started with AFTRA, because we used to be two separate unions, SAG and AFTRA, if we organized a station a year, that was a big deal. Now it's like we're like at maybe between 5 and 10 stations a year, or platforms might, as the case may be, we're organizing, and we're organizing, big shops. So it's it's happening in a really good way. And the thing that I like most about what's been happening over the past 10, 15 years of organizing is it's not just employees who are angry at their boss or have a beef. To me, it's coming from a very positive place of wanting to have a voice at work, wanting to have that place to talk through issues with their bosses, kind of on a level playing field, if you will. And I think that's good, because I don't think that change comes from negative. I think it comes from positive intent. And so if you have an interest in organizing your station, you can reach out to us, and we can talk to you. But we will put you in touch with a worker who did that at their shop, as opposed to just talking to me.
Okay, thank you for that, Mary. And Beverly White Higgs, longtime member of NABJ, says thank you for hosting this vital conversation. Will it be archived? The panelists are dropping real nuggets, and I like to share with my peers. It will be. It will be on our YouTube page, Beverly, and for our attendees. That's going to be on the NABJ YouTube page, and then our membership, our national office usually puts it into our newsletter that goes out. So it will be there. It will live there. So thank you for that. To another question, and I think this is a big one. And I live in a market with a Tegna station and a Nexstar station. Reporters here are terrified that if the merger goes through, jobs will be lost due to redundancy. So they're applying for jobs elsewhere, or thinking of leaving the industry altogether. What say you? Who wants to take?
Well, I'll start. Um, I was thanked personally, and so was my client, thanked personally after we killed the Standard General Tegna deal by employees at Tegna who said, "Thank you for saving my job." So I'm of the mind that, as I said earlier, it ain't over till it's over, and you can't assume that this deal is going to happen. I don't blame you for being scared. I would be too, but fear is an internal emotion. It's something that we all have to deal with, but check that fear against the facts. Listen to what I just said about how there's real pushback on this particular deal from very conservative voices who are close to the Trump administration. And I would say don't give up hope if it's really a harmful to you, to your family, to leave. I mean, hang on. There's a long road to go before this deal were to come through. Now, that having been said, I want to argue the other side as well. Do mergers result in job losses? Yes, we just went through that. I mean, the answer is yes. That's why they do it very often, is to achieve what they call synergies. I think synergies is French for job cuts, but that's what they're doing. They're trying to save money by limiting jobs. Jobs will be lost if that transaction goes through, if you're in a market where two stations are owned by the two separate companies today. That's the essence of a reduction in voices and reduction in competition through consolidation. That's why many of us are against it. So you're not wrong to be afraid of that. I would just say we're not even at the first inning yet, and let's see what happens.
Okay. All right, we will go to this next question. Oh, someone said regarding the timeline for Tegna Nexstar merger, if it succeeds, how much time do we have to prepare?
So the starting gun is always the application at the FCC that's filed that then becomes docketed. They put it out for public comment, and you'll see right in there are timeframes. You have to file oppositions by this date. The applicants have to respond to that by the next date. Typically, for a deal of that size, it's at least a year, typically. The Department of Justice Antitrust Division also has to run through an analysis. Um, I think the reason why we have not yet seen a filing at the FCC, even though Nexstar put out a press release that it had reached a definitive agreement, I think Nexstar is talking to the chairman of the FCC, trying to grease this thing in advance without putting it out for public comment so that they're not required to disclose those meetings. That's one lawyer's opinion. I could be wrong, but let's assume I'm right about that. Maybe it's less than a year. Let's call it between 6 months and a year. That would be lightning fast speed compared to the past, but it still would require this public comment period. There would be opposition. And as I said, there may be some very significant to the Trump administration opponents to the deal who show up, and that's going to slow things down. Uh, Opposition from serious stakeholders slows things down. So again, you're going to have some public indicators that start the clock, if you will. But if past is prologue, it'll be a year before there's any final closing.
Okay, thank you for that. And then someone said, making an ad look like a story sounds benign. What if I don't want to pivot? That democracy's on fire. I majored in journalism to do the news. Did I make a mistake? Renee?
So I'll answer that. And, content marketing, that's what it is by definition. And if you want to do news, do news. Okay. Just do some of the things that I referred to earlier, meet the expectations. Make sure that you stay centered by, as Mary said, knowing your value and your worth and what you bring to the table. You're going to have to advocate for yourself. You will have to get comfortable speaking for your work and making sure that you are, like I said, tooting your own horn and building those relationships with people who can vouch for you and who can speak your name when you're in a room, when you're not in the room. That's going to be really crucial to you being able to stay in the business. And also, it's okay if your values change. So if you do get to a point where you've decided, I've done this long enough, I have fought the good fight, but I want to do something else, that's okay too. But if you want to stay in news and you want to do storytelling, then that's exactly what you should continue to do. Stay open to other opportunities, upskill where you may need to. For instance, if you're being introduced to work on different platforms, make sure that you are getting the knowledge and the skills and the tools that you need to be successful in doing those jobs. And something else that Mary said that I think is key and crucial is mentorship. Okay. Broaden and expand your network with your peers, with mentors, with people who have traveled the road that you want to travel, and learn what they have done to live through moments like this. Because again, we've seen it throughout the industry and over the years where we've had to evolve and shift as with cable and digital and social, and now as we're seeing with streaming and AI. So mentorship is really key to having someone in your corner who can help you stay centered and help you stay focused and guide you and help give you the advice that you need to be able to stay in the business.
Okay. And thank you for that, Renee. Where can folks find you? Because we're gonna wrap here. Where can folks find you?
I have a website, which is resiliencewinscoaching.com. You can also email me at renee@resiliencewinscoaching.com as well.
Okay. And Mary? You're muted, Mary?
Apologies, I have a crazy mouse. You can reach me at mary.caballero@sagaftra.org. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say I'm here in part, largely still here because of Belva Davis. So I just want to pay tribute to her as a union leader who got me here. So thank you, Belva, and thinking of her now.
Thank you. And David?
You can email me at david@istreetadvocates.com. That's david@istreetadvocates.com.
Okay. All right, we want to thank our panelists for coming today. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. NABJ offers year-round training, development, and networking opportunities. If you're not already an active member, please join our family or renew your membership. Just go to, there's a link in there, bit.ly/join NABJ. We're also at nabjonline.org. I believe that's the right website. But thank you so much for everyone for joining us. Thank you, David. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Renee. And again, we just want to encourage our members to stay encouraged, stay in there for the good fight, but also be prepared, because they say when when you are prepared, what is it? If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready, right? And so that's what the purpose of this was. So thank you so much, everyone, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Take care.